Hey everyone, this video is going to be a demonstration of the sketching techniques that correspond with the presentation on sketching techniques. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be going through and looking at and applying some of the sketching techniques that we talked about, starting with sketching lines. So first of all, on the sheet here you see that the first direction is that we sketch horizontal and vertical lines. So a few things are important in this process. First of all, one thing that we learned in the presentation is that sketching horizontal lines is done from left to right if you are right-handed. The exception is if you're left-handed, they're actually created from right to left. So depending on your dominant hand dictates which way you actually draw the line. So you can draw that as a continuous line, which I will demonstrate, or a line with short strokes to accomplish the task. A couple things that I want to point out. One, if we're drawing from right to left, I'm just going to label these points, point A and point B. What we want to do is we want to focus on point B. Point B will be the end point. I am right-handed, so I will be drawing from the left to the right, and I will focus on point B. Okay. The other thing we want to focus on, besides focusing on point B to get our line to, is also to focus on a consistent line weight. Okay. We want to draw dark lines, consistently dark lines, and so we want to focus on that as we create each line. So again, going back to the first item, is we want to focus on point B, kind of like when you're throwing ball with someone. You look at them, you aim at them in order to get the ball there, or if you're shooting basketball, you're aiming at the basketball goal, that kind of principle in mind, or shooting at a target, or whatever the case may be. All right, so we want to draw lines from point A to point B, looking at point B, and if we do that, we're going to get a fairly straight line as we draw. And notice my line weight is fairly consistent. It's consistently dark. It may vary a little bit in thickness because I'm using a wooden pencil, instead of like a mechanical pencil. But you can see that in terms of the darkness, I'm applying the same pressure, and that's one way that you can control line weight, is just by applying the same pressure. Okay, again, you guys can draw horizontal lines. That's simple. But the key is to apply the characteristics that we were just talking about. One, so that you can get a fairly straight line, you're aiming at the end point. Okay, and then secondly, that you want to focus on line weight, because line weight is something that you're going to need to learn to apply throughout these sketching exercises that we'll be moving into, or assignments. The next type of line is vertical lines, and vertical lines are drawn from top to bottom. Okay, there is no exception. It doesn't matter whether you're right-handed or left-handed. They're drawn from top to bottom. Some of you may have grown accustomed to drawing them from bottom to top. It's easier, especially if you haven't trained yourself out of it. It's a whole lot easier with control to go from top to bottom. So I'm going to label this one A and this one B. And so my goal is to look at B when I'm drawing this. Now I'm actually kind of hiding that information from you guys, so I'll try to pull out. This is going to make it a little more difficult. But anyway, I want to focus on B, and in focusing on B, I should get a nice straight line. Okay, likewise, do the same thing. Nice straight line, top to bottom, nice straight line. Okay, and the key is to focus on B. Now, an alternative might be that you might say, oh, well, the paper, is not taped down or anything, so I could rotate it and draw like I'm drawing my horizontal lines, which is just fine. It's just another technique. It may be easier for you. And again, aim to point B like this. Okay, it's where your focus is that's going to help you to be successful or not. Okay, so I'm going to just reposition it back and go ahead and draw from top to bottom. I do prefer the method that I was just using because it is easier, because you can see my lines are a little bit not as good. I'm getting a little bit messy in there with my line. So take care in doing that. You may just want to rotate your paper in order to accomplish that task. All right, moving on to the next set of lines. We've got angular lines. So in the presentation, we talked about that to create angular lines, you begin with a 90-degree angle. Before we do that, we'll just kind of go through this little example here where I want you to kind of get acclimated with angled lines. So we can just draw lines from one point to another, focusing on the end point so that we get nice straight parallel lines. Okay, again, you got to trust yourself. If you're used to looking at the lead on your pencil, then this is going to seem a little awkward. I am used to looking at the lead on my pencil, and so it seems a little awkward to me, and it may as well to you. So I'm going to rotate my paper just to make this a little bit easier and continue to draw those lines for this example. Okay. The better I focus, you can see I'm kind of messed up there, but the better I focus on the end point, the better my line works out. Okay. The key is we want to be consistently dark. Okay. And we also want to focus on the end point. Okay, so I'm going to change that and zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see more of what's going on here. So the key to sketching angles really, and that wasn't applied in this example, but it will be here, is to start out with a 90-degree angle. So right here, if you think about, like axes, this would be like the X and this would be the Y. Okay, as far as axes, X and Y. But in terms of degrees, this is also known as 0 degrees and this is 90 degrees. Okay, so we've got our 90-degree angle already set out for us. This point right here, as you guys know, is the vertex. Okay, and so in this first example, we're sketching a 45. And if you remember from the presentation, to create a 45-degree angle, you subdivide the 45-degree angle one time. Okay, so that means we need one reference mark out here. So we kind of look in here and we see, hey, that's about halfway in between. So we do a light reference mark. That's a little bit dark, but a light reference mark because we want to draw a line through it. And from the vertex here, we're going to draw a line through that point. Okay, again, aiming at that point. And that line should be approximately 45 degrees. Now, how can we tell? Well, let me extend the line here just a little bit, this little line right here to help me. And I'll extend this line a little bit and pull in a device used to measure angles, which is a protractor. Pull that in and you can kind of see, okay, let's get it set up right. You can see I'm fairly close. In fact, wow. Right on 45, which is surprising. So, it's not important that it is absolutely perfect on 45. What's important is that it's close to 45. So that's a 45-degree angled line. And certainly if you were a couple degrees off, in either direction, we're still going to call it a 45-degree angled line. So, that's kind of the basis for creating a 45. All right, the next one is 30-60-degree angles. And for 30-60-degree angles, what you're trying to do is, again, use a 90-degree angle. All right, this time we're subdividing the 90-degree angle twice. So we need two marks, so we're dividing it into thirds, right? So subdivide 90-degree angle twice into 3 equal parts. So you kind of place these little tick marks to where they look like they're dividing up the space. You don't want the 45 mark because that will just confuse you, mess you up, and you won't end up with 3 equal parts. Okay, so again, starting from the vertex, I'm going to draw a line through that reference point, and likewise, or tick mark through that tick mark. Okay, and hopefully we won't know unless I measure it with a protractor. Hopefully that ends up being pretty close to 30 and 60. So it's not bad, but you can tell it's not perfectly equal. And that's part of sketching, is we want it good. It'd be great if it were perfect, but then we'd be having to use tools to make that happen. So you can see that I'm a little bit off of 30 for this line here. I'm a little bit off of 30. I'm more about 28 degrees. And this line, I'm a little more accurate. I'm really close to 60, so not bad. And we'll take that. And you can see I kind of missed my reference mark. I might have been a little bit better if I'd have hit my reference mark more accurately. All right, so that's our 30 and that's our 60. And notice these lines are light and these are dark because we want our lines that we're actually drawing angles of to pop, to show up, okay? And so we'll talk about line types later because it's going to be important for you to know what line types actually are. All right, we're going to move to the next section. So I'm going to leave it zoomed in and slide to the next section. So the next section, you're learning how to do a couple things. One, you're learning how to sketch a square, a circle, and arcs, okay? So to do that, as we move on into our presentation, to sketch one of these figures, you start by lightly constructing a square. So we're going to do that. In order to do that, we're going to need a little bit of something to measure with, okay? So I'm going to get another piece of paper, just a random piece of paper to actually use and as a guide to assist me in making these measures, okay? So hopefully you can see this paper okay as I move it around, so you can watch and see this happen, okay? The first thing to note is that we have a distance marked off, and there's a little tick mark on this line right here. So what I'm going to do is, my goal is to kind of construct a square to aid me in creating my circle. So I'm going to measure off that distance. Notice my paper is right there on that mark and then right here. And I'm going to take that distance and I'm going to transfer it to the other lines, okay? So I'm going to transfer this. This takes a little bit of effort, okay? Technique is a little bit more challenging here as the shape gets more complex. We're dealing with lines before. Now we're starting to deal with curves, and curves are much more challenging. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of trace over this line. I want to make a parallel line through this point right here. Okay, I'm kind of training myself. Likewise, I'll trace over that line again and make a parallel line through that reference point or tick mark as well. Likewise, okay, I'm going to kind of go over that vertical line, slide my hand over, and go over this vertical line. Okay, go over that vertical line again, just kind of training myself, all right, to create that vertical line, all right? And I've got a pretty decent square, okay? So I can use that square to make 45s, because with just 4 points, I can't effectively make a circle. If I tried, I'd end up making almost a square within a square, and it'd have some curvature to it, but it wouldn't be good quality. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of connecting the corners of the square. I'm going to rotate this around a little bit. You'll see me do that a little bit more as we go throughout this following this technique. And these lines, these diagonals, I'll give you another term there, are going to be used to put additional marks on, okay? And when with the application of these marks, you should see in these marks, and I'm not making them too dark or too big, keep that in mind, you should see the shape of a circle, okay? So if you look at all 8 of these marks, you can kind of see the shape of the circle. Now, in order to create an effective circle, what you want to do is line up a minimum, or line up 3 points, okay? If you line up 2 points, you'll end up drawing pretty much a straight line. So to avoid that, what you want to do is to connect 3 points together, and it'll force the curve, okay? So what I do is sometimes I don't even touch my pencil to the paper and kind of trace those 3 marks, and you can see how it's kind of curving my pencil, and then I'll start to put pressure on, a little bit of pressure, and I'm going to leave it light because I want it light initially. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate that around, and I'm kind of using my palm as the as almost an axis or a turning point, and you can kind of see this coming about again, lining up 3, and maybe initially don't put your lead to the paper until you kind of have the feel for it. It takes a little time. This technique takes a little bit of time. Okay, and you can kind of see, if you look there, you can see the circle. Okay, so bring that around for you. And right there's the circle. Okay, so we created a square initially. The square is helping us to create the circle. This is one method for creating the circle, one technique. So I want the circle to be evident, so I'm going to go ahead and begin to darken it. Okay, now if I'd have darkened it straight away, my success rate would have been a lot lower. And you can see there's already an arc in there. Okay, the arc is a quarter of the circle right now. All right, so I'm going to rotate this around and continue to darken the circle. Right, again, being consistent with my line weight. All right, and all I'm doing is tracing over, and you can kind of see that I'm using some aspect of short strokes when doing this, and that makes it a little more effective. Usually with curves, I use those short strokes. I'm do a better curve if I do that. So there's the circle, and created. Now let's see how good that circle actually is. I'm going to pull out a template here just to kind of help you to see how good that circle actually is. And I think this is the right one. Check that out. Okay, it's not going to be perfect, but we want it to be pretty good. Okay, and so you can see that circle is pretty good based on that template layout right there. So I'm going to take that away because I'm not trying to use the tools. If I use the tools, it's no longer truly a sketch. All right, so let's go to the next two examples. So now we're going to make arcs, and we're given these two 90-degree angles. So I'm going to focus on one first. Okay, so this is our 0, this is our 90. Not that we have to label those, but to give you a reference. To do this, again, to make an arc like a circle, you want to have 3 points in order to line up. If you line up more than 3, I don't think it's going to benefit you any more than just lining up 3, so I would stick to 3. So the first thing I want to do is subdivide this angle, all right, one time. So what I'm making is a 45 since I'm subdividing it one time, but I'm not trying to see the 45, or I'm not trying to make it dark like I did previously. My goal is to use it to help me to construct the circle. So notice that we have a distance already marked off. You see the little mark there. So I'm going to measure that distance. I think it's different from my previous, so I'll put my paper at one edge and then come down here and mark at that vertex. Okay, and that's going to be my radius. All right, which I didn't use that term earlier, but that's a good term to understand. You know, arcs and circles are measured by radius. Circles are measured by other things as well, but as are arcs. So anyway, I've got 3 points. I've got this point, this point, this point. And so what I need to do is to line those 3 points up. Okay, you can kind of see that taking place. And then I will trace over it because I want this arc to be dark. All right, and there is the arc. All right, and so now we've created an arc. So we've got a circle, we've got an arc. We'll create one more arc in this example here. So for this example, likewise, we're just creating a quarter of a circle. Again, we want to subdivide it. All right, one time using the 45-degree angled line. We want to take that measurement, and that measurement, I believe, is like the measurement of my circle. So yes, it sure is. So I don't have to be careful. Since I've got 2 marks there, you want to be careful as you transfer that distance, because you might mess up. You could use a different edge of that paper. I'm going to rotate this around to make it a little bit easier for me to actually come in and strike the arc. Again, lining up the 3 points. You might not touch the pencil to the paper just yet. Strike that arc light and then come back in and darken it up. And I'm doing a better job on this one than I did on the last one. Okay, but there it is. So we've drawn circle and 2 arcs. All right, we're ready to move to the last part of this assignment here. So let me give you another method for creating a circle. And there are other methods other than this, but these are the ones that you can fall back on as you're creating objects in the future. Okay, so again, like the last example, okay, like the example over here, we're given, you know, we'll say an X and a Y, and you're given a little mark on there that represents the initial radius. Okay, the radius is the distance from here to here. Okay, we'll call that R. And anyway, so we're going to take that radius and we want to transfer it to the other lines. So I'm going to take that distance, which happens to be the same as it previously was. So I'll just, I don't have to remark it on my paper. Got consistency here, which is kind of nice. This time I'm not using the square technique. I'm using a different technique in order to create this circle, okay? Now, the more accurate you are with the measurement, the better your circle turns out. If you're not accurate, it won't be a circle, it'll be an oval or some other kind of odd shape, all right? We want to be accurate with our measurements. Also, we want to go in here and subdivide these 90s, just like we did to make the arc. So if you make, subdivide each one, again, the better you do that, the better your technique will show up. And I'm going to rotate this around a little bit so to make it easier for myself, right? And strike in my line. So again, I want to come from my vertex and strike that through. Okay. And so, and again, I'm not using the square, so I'm just going to take my measurement, my radius measurement, and I'm going to put a mark. Notice how I stay on the same line to transfer my measurements. And so again, staying on the same, switching lines this time and making my marks, okay? That one might be a little bit out there. Okay, so if you look at all the marks that we have, you can see the circle in there, okay? And so our goal again is to line up 3 at a time. It doesn't matter which 3. I could line up these 3, whichever. I like to kind of do 1/4 at a time, but it really doesn't matter as long as you line up 3 marks to force that curve. Okay, and I'll just do that all the way around. Okay, again. And then the last 3. Okay, and once I feel like it's pretty good, if I don't like what I see, then I might come in here and do a little bit of erasing or something like that. If there's, definitely something doesn't look right. But if you follow the technique properly and you do your measurements well, then it's going to turn out quite nice. Okay, so this is where I do those short strokes. Now you want to be careful with that because it can get messier and you want it to be clear. So it can get messier. It's hard to rotate this around. All right, and you want to be consistent with your line weight. Getting a little bit thick there, didn't intend to get that thick. Okay, and you can kind of see I took a little more care and than I did a little last time, but let's take the template again and you can kind of see how that worked out. Okay, not perfect, but pretty good. Okay, and that's what we're going for is pretty good. All right, so that's our second circle, and you're just using a little bit different technique instead of using the square, which you certainly can use, and sometimes that's the best option to use. This is an option without using the square. And just kind of taking that out to shorten up the process a little bit. All right, last but not least, we're creating some tangent arcs, okay? So we sketched the circle, we're sketching some tangent arcs. So this C represents our center, and our radius, kind of just this grid work here, our radius is to the outside of that. So we're going to say, distance from here to here, little measure line there is R, which is our radius, okay? So that means this is our mark, this is our mark, and this is our mark. We're going to kind of create this S shape. So what we want to do, just like we did previously with our arcs and circles, is we want, if this is our center, we want to draw our 45s. Now the nice thing about already having the squares, is that you can just draw your 45s like this, and then take the measurement of the radius, so you can use another edge. So I'll just take that measurement that I pointed out, so you can see the corner of my little paper. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure that on these diagonals, or 45s. And how well I do that relates to how well this turns out. Okay, so likewise, you don't want to make your marks too big. I usually make my marks not necessarily light, but angled in the direction that I can trace over them, and they kind of disappear. If you look at any of my circles, you can see that those marks kind of disappear in the shape itself. Okay, so there that part is. So on the bottom, here again is my circle. So I'm going to make that mark. I'm going to have another mark here, another mark here. This time I'm going to go, instead of a semicircle, I'm going to go 3/4 of a circle. Okay, so I need my 45s from the center, and I want to transfer the radius measurement, which is the same. Okay, so I've transferred that information. Now I'm ready to begin creating my arcs. So I'll rotate that around so we can do that fairly quickly. Again, light. These are called construction lines. Okay, it's a type of line which we'll talk about later. And that allows us to create lines that are light. Construction lines are lines that are light. They're easy to erase, and the whole point of construction lines is to make it one where you can use these lines to help you construct what you're trying to construct, but also they're light in case you need a change. Because once you've gone dark, it's very hard. Once you've drawn dark, it's very hard to erase it, because that lead is penetrated into the paper fiber. Also, you've indented the paper some just due to the pressure of going dark. So you want to wait and darken after you use these construction lines. And trust me, it may seem like extra work initially, but once you start using the technique, you will find that it works for you, not against you. And you'll get faster with it, and it'll become a lot easier. And easier to draw, and easier to draw well. Okay, so your drawing will certainly improve. Your sketching will improve because you're using the techniques. Okay, and so that's the last thing that we're going to draw there as far as the techniques are concerned. So pretty good work. All right. One thing I want to do also on this is we've got this feature down at the bottom called a title block. Okay, title block is where you have your name and information related to the assignment. So what we want to do is fill out our name. If you notice, and I'm going to, so I have zoomed in some so you can see, but anyway, if you notice, there are lines, light lines in there that allow you to do your what's called lettering. We're going to talk more about lettering at a later point. What we want to do is use capital letters, and you can kind of see that I am just using that line to help me do my letters. So use capital letters, be as neat as you can. We'll talk about lettering. Lettering is just a way to communicate clearly. And the technique that's used in architectural and engineering drawings is uppercase lettering. Okay, and we'll talk more specifically about that. So put your name in there. Mine's a little bit tight. Just first and last, always first and last. Place your period in here, whatever that happens to be. I'm just going to put second because I don't have a second period this semester. All right, and then the date, which, 9, whatever, 9/9/20. Okay, whatever the date happens to be, the day that you you complete this. Okay, so that's it for applying sketching techniques. Our next video will be about line types. So take care, and I hope it goes well for you.